So unfortunately, and let's talk about the reality of the situation. There are, unfortunately, a lot of people who come from a particular country, come from Honduras, and a lot of the people who are dealing drugs happen to be of that ethnicity.
And it comes to an end when we take the steps to be more aggressive with law enforcement and less tolerant of all the bullshit that has destroyed our city.
San Francisco's least trendy neighborhood. I give you Visitation Valley, where I can guarantee you there's no yoga salons or craft beer. But over that hill there, that's what used to be Candlestick Park. Now this crime tour is not going to be about Viz Valley, but for me, it's where this crime tour starts.
Something kind of bizarre happened in this godforsaken spot on the far outskirts of San Francisco. Out of the blue one day comes the arrival of a strange group of teenage kids. Hispanic kids they were, boys and girls. They suddenly appeared and took up residence right here next to the freeway, on the other side of this fence and under this road. It was in the fall of 2019 when a group of 15 or so kids started camping illegally in this area above the 101 freeway. There had often been homeless camps here in the past, but these young people were not your typical homeless. They were not mentally ill or tweaking too hard on some drug. They didn't look at all like the local kids. And in fact, they were all well-dressed and well-fed, but living under the roadway of the freeway embankment. We know prostitution was going on in there as we saw the traffic of Johns coming and going. Car burglary numbers in the area shot through the roof during the time they were here. Numerous calls to authority went ignored because no state or city police agency felt it was in their jurisdiction. It was only after one of the kids fell down the steep embankment and ended up in the freeway did the authorities take notice. Strangely, before rescue crews could help the fallen kid, this well-dressed woman appeared and went on high heels into the filthy bushes of the campsite area. She had some interaction with the group and then quickly got the hell out of there when cops arrived. The next day, this guy in this dirty SUV arrived and took what was left of the group away. SUV guy had been around a lot before then to shuttle groups of kids back and forth from wherever. As a farewell gift to the neighborhood, they started a pretty big fire in the trees the night before they left. I later found out, off the record from an SF cop, they were Honduran illegal immigrant juveniles working off a debt to the Sinaloa cartel coyotes by selling drugs and doing prostitution.
Run by Honduran nationals based in Oakland, selling in the Tenderloin.
So we commuter drug dealers. Every morning, a new load of drugs would come into the East Bay, package it up into the Tenderloin to sell your drugs, then come back to the East Bay at night with the profits.
They were forced to live camped out here in Visitation Valley and commute 5 miles to work in the Tenderloin. This would go on until the cartel had room for them in their series of flops they owned on International Boulevard. All this was going on about the same time I first heard the word fentanyl. I would learn more about fentanyl and its connection to my former young neighbors. Korean bars, Vietnamese sandwiches, Cambodian donut stores. The Tenderloin's got it all. I've been coming here now for 42 years, and in that time I've seen it all in terms of the people, the streets, and the drugs.
I've always known that in the Tenderloin things could go south in a hurry.
Back in the day, it was nothing to be surrounded by dealers and junkies and street thugs. All that's changed now because in the last several years, the streets of the Loin have become infested with a younger, tougher, more ruthless breed of drug dealer. These are young, oftentimes juvenile illegal immigrants from the Central American country of Honduras. These are not asylum-seeking migrants desperate to escape tyranny. No, these are savvy, fearless, tireless street soldiers known in the drug world as Hondos. Male and female minions trafficked by Mexican cartels for indentured servitude into the sex and drug trades in sanctuary cities across the U.S. They work off their coyote fees and current living expenses through drug sales and prostitution. Nearly all of them will be muling Chinese fentanyl and other contraband across the border onto the despair-ridden streets of the Tenderloin. This is a committed invasion of ruthlessly disciplined, slum-hardened Central American narco-traficantes. It is precisely what Trump was talking about when he mortally offended you by saying they're not sending their best. This osmotic flow of migrants is cordially sanctioned and offered unconditional sanctuary through the Biden administration's treasonous open border policy. And in compassionate San Francisco, the 24/7 commerce of street dealing boldly flourishes in a cocky, audacious manner that is right up in the grill of residents and cops and goes completely unfettered by the so-called justice system. When Joe Biden took office and threw open the border, it created a perfect storm for this CCP-manufactured poison called fentanyl to ravage our streets. You already had sanctuary city laws to protect the killers. You already had a strong defund the police movement. You had Soros-backed DAs in place absolutely opposed to prosecuting street drug dealing. Now you had an unchecked conduit for the drugs to flow and an invading horde of committed guerrillas more than happy to give their life for the chance to taste freedom and to sling dope in the land of the free and the home of the brave.
The right-wing billionaire.
Disgraced and recalled ex-DA Chesa Boudin's dream of restorative justice has allowed for the unchecked mass poisoning of our citizens and led to the overdose deaths of 1.5 Americans every single day here on the one-party ruled streets of Sanctuary City, SF. We've covered in past videos Boudin's misguided attempts to make up for the sins of his cop-killing mother and father. We suggest you go to our most recent video, which explains how his restorative justice push was meant to decrease incarceration and promote diversionary programs that offered the gun felon a more compassionate path to rehabilitation. More compassionate than worn-out old-fashioned ideas like jail. But in the case we feature in our video, this ill-conceived agenda of restorative justice was used and resulted in a tragic double murder that truly would make you wonder, do black lives really matter to progressives? We thank the voters of San Francisco for throwing Chesa out in the recent recall effort.
They're frustrated.
But why Hondurans, and why specifically juvenile Hondurans to sling the fentanyl? And what do sanctuary city laws accomplish to further this criminal enterprise? Diabolical Mexican cartels know that juvenile illegals are rarely prosecuted by naive gringos in Democrat-run cities, and that the sanctuary laws assure them their young charges will not be reported to ICE and deported. Leftists hide behind two main falsifications to support sanctuary laws. One, they claim that law-abiding members of the undocumented community are more likely to come forward and help the police in investigations if they can be assured they will not be deported. And we know there's been a giant uptick in snitching out MS-13 and other cartel gangs since Sanctuary City became a thing in San Francisco. You're right. Secondly, leftists will lecture you on the inhumanity of deporting felons right back into the brutal arms of the right-wing dictatorships the U.S. has created in Central America. Even if that were true, I'd argue it's a greater atrocity to allow them to continue murdering our youth with the poisonous drugs they sling. So what do progressives end up doing? They operate a revolving door system of justice in sanctuary cities. Cartel bosses get a good belly laugh knowing that the cities in which they choose to do business, Hondos-slung fentanyl-driven mass murder, will be cheerfully green-lighted by power-hungry Democrats. There are generations of Hondurans born into crime and poverty who are highly motivated to submit to the slavery of the cartels in order to go north and take part in this depraved scheme.
It is very telling indeed that recently incarcerated Mexican cartel boss El Chapo Guzman has given much of the credit he achieved in the narco world to greasy politicians he partnered with north of the border.
And yeah, I do think it is a conspiracy theory that he met face to face with Nancy Pelosi. He didn't have to, because it's a documented fact that in 2018 she met in Guatemala with a cabal of Soros honchos where they hashed out a deal to allow for tons more asylum claims to be accepted into the U.S. from Asia, Africa, and El Chapo's favorite place to find good employees, Honduras. For that deal to happen, though, they would first have to get rid of Trump. San Francisco has been a Democrat Party stronghold for so long now that no one who can currently fog a mirror is able to remember any period of time where real power was held by conservatives. And in San Francisco, no Democrat has held power longer than Nancy Pelosi.
Every time I see that statue, it reminds me of how we got the grift of Nancy Pelosi.
Because when this guy, Congressman for San Francisco, Philip Burton, dies in 1983, his wife Sala coronates loyal functionary and hotshot fundraiser Nancy Pelosi as the new Queen of San Francisco. Nancy faces the voters for the first time in 1987 and absolutely crushes her first Republican opponent. Something she will go on to do in all her future elections, to compile an undefeated streak rivaling that of Floyd Mayweather. In going an astounding 21-0 in electoral contests, she thrusts herself right up there into the pantheon of dictators for life, like Robert Mugabe, Kim Il-sung, and Fidel Castro. So you would think that with that 40-year record showing resounding voter support, Pelosi would have racked up an impressive list of accomplishments to trumpet for the residents of her district.
That is to say, everything is fine here.
But that's not how Nancy rolls.
Most San Francisco residents would never consider Pelosi as a strong advocate for the nitty-gritty of local San Francisco politics.
We stand for women, unlike Nancy Pelosi.
Never in a million years would they consider her as a fighter in the D.C. trenches.
I don't know what I would have done if ice cream were not invented.
Scratching and clawing to bring forth legislation forcing a federal response to the fentanyl issue destroying San Francisco.
Yeah, all that might be true. But how can you say that Nancy doesn't bring home the pork? Nancy was super instrumental in getting Doyle Drive all polished up. She did this by making sure there was plenty of cash poured in from the feds into this enormous over-budget boondoggle here in the Presidio. Now that Nancy has effectively beat down the effort to ban lawmakers from stock market windfalls, she and her financial whiz husband are going to continue racking up big market wins. So when she and Polly the P are sober enough to fire up the Porsche and take it up to their private vineyard in Napa, they have to drive over the Golden Gate Bridge. And to get from their crib in Pack Heights to the bridge, they need to drive this route right through the Presidio and up Doyle Drive. It's so much more pleasant now that all that tacky military presence has been demolished. So if the average SF voter has no expectations for Nancy, then who? The mayor? The governor?
So how's about this for big Nancy achievements coming to the folks of San Francisco?
A woman's right to
Well,
choose.
she's been great about making constant noise for the funding of abortion and LGBT issues.
Celebrate! Let's do it!
Trans rights are human rights.
And nothing else for 40 years. Well, no, she did scratch and claw to get multiple waves of funding for a place kind of far from her district, but vital to its security, that being the Ukraine.
And that's how Nancy blows the doors off everybody
runs up a 21-0 record. But we at the Crime Tour strongly encourage you to view this as a local problem. See it as one that should be addressed by our local representatives serving at the federal level.
How about this? How about the speaker leaves the Pack Heights mansion and leaves the bodyguards and drives down Van Ness a couple miles to, say, Eddy Street?
That would be a great place for her to exit her taxpayer-funded, up-armored SUV and take a junkie's walk through the Tenderloin. Let her experience the angst one feels while being blitzed by a menacing swarm of Hondos, all desperate to make their daily bones for the cartel. Nancy needs to be confronted with the stench of human effluvium permeating the loin as she unsteadily shuffles downhill on Hyde Street to the Civic Center Injection Center. She needs to press the flesh while tiptoeing on high heels through the filth and misery emanating from the legion of addicts she's invited into her city to do nothing more than lay around all day and defile public property. Pelosi needs to see the look in the eyes of those she has so compassionately condemned to death.
We all know that ain't gonna happen, and that the speaker will continue to turn a blind eye to the whole damn mess.
If Madam Speaker wanted to put an end to all the OD deaths on the streets of her district, she could do it tomorrow. She'd call the mayor and tell her to get a moratorium on sanctuary laws for drug dealers installed, and it'd be done before lunch. She'd tell Biden and Mayorkas to get off their asses and button up the goddamn border. And then she'd head off to confession.
Joe Biden has said he's running in 2024. In fact, he's given us his word as a Biden. Nancy Pelosi is hoping to approve the 22-0. But the real question is, if the Democrats get shellacked in the midterms, is Nancy going to retire?
Let's make her retire at 21-1. If you believe Nancy is at all culpable in the commission of this systematic program of mass murder, that's the least we can do. Or if you believe anybody who represents you at any level of government is for open borders and sanctuary laws, they're in on it too and need to be voted out. But before the champagne corks truly fly at Nancy's retirement party, please question her as to the sincerity of her mantra. You know, the one where she sucks in her dentures and stretches her Botox-deadened features into a compassionate smile at the camera and croaks.
Our children, our children, our children.
Is she referring to the 20,000 unaccompanied minors to cross the border who have now disappeared?
Remind her of the thousands of children who die every year on the long journey north.
And by all means, remind her of the steady stream of Honduran children trafficked through sanctuary laws straight into her district to engage in the sex trade and to poison the children of her district.